Hey everyone, welcome to Forma Therapy. I am the video channel producer, you can call me PD, and today we are going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be starting a new series on this channel where we're going to be talking about photography, filmmaking, videography, writing, and just whatever, because I am a video producer, but I do all sorts of things. I take photos, I direct stuff, and I kind of wanted to share what I know. Now, here's the thing, I am still a student of all these things. The truth is, you can never stop learning. You can never stop learning more about photography. You can never stop learning more about filmmaking. Art is an ever-evolving process, so sometimes I might not know some stuff, and sometimes what I know might be an incorrect way of doing things, but everyone has different ways on how they approach art. So just know that whatever I teach you on this channel, it's just my way of doing things, and it's how I was taught. Now today we're going to be starting a segment called 5-Question Photography. Every video I'm going to be taking 5 questions from you guys and answering them and showing you guys how I approach things. So I went on Twitter and YouTube and I asked you guys to submit your questions regarding photography, and we got some good ones. So here are your 5 questions. Now to keep this video a little bit interesting, I thought instead of just being an educational, informative video, it can also simultaneously work as a vlog. I travel frequently to LA to do photo shoots, and so I want to show you guys some of the footage that I take from those photo shoots. So that will also show a little bit of my videography style and some of the shenanigans that I get into along the way. What?
Look.
Look where? Oh, what the fuck?
I was so scared. I was like, what?
We gon' break up, then we make up. Act like we're gonna be friends. Flames to fire, take me higher. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again.
Oh my god!
Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again, all over again.
The first question comes from I Don't Do Sports. Same. Me too. Now they ask, my dad has talked to me about f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO, but how do the 3 relate to each other? Could you explain it? I'm still flipping confused. Okay, so f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO. What does it all mean? Well, these are photography basics, and I actually didn't want to start off doing a photography basics video. You know, I feel like a lot of people actually know this information, but I also understand it might be a little bit confusing for those of you who don't actually have cameras and get out there and mess with things. Now, I think the best way to learn is through actually doing. That's my approach to everything: photography, filmmaking, writing. I never took a photography class in my life. It's why I don't charge for photos ever. I don't ever charge anyone to do a photo shoot. My photo shoots are completely free. I may pay a model to shoot with me, but I never actually charge anyone to shoot with me because I feel like I have never put in the effort to learn more about photography and improve, so I don't really deserve to actually charge people for photos. Now, people like my photography, but the thing is, I am completely self-taught. Now, because I'm into filmmaking, I needed a camera and I had to learn my camera. And nowadays, amateur and indie filmmaking are done on DSLR cameras, which not only takes great video, but are naturally for photography. So that's how I learned photos. So what exactly is f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO? Well, to put it simply, it all has to do with light. I think showing you is gonna help more, but we'll start off with ISO. So ISO simply brightens your image. The higher your ISO, the brighter your image is going to be. However, you want the lowest ISO possible because if you raise your ISO, you get digital noise in your photos. Because there is only a set amount of light in the scene you are trying to light, you are digitally adding more light. It's fake, it's not real. And because of that, your image gets way more noise. So you actually want a low ISO as possible. Every photographer, every filmmaker, the ideal ISO is 100. That tends to be the lowest ISO most cameras can go. And you never want to go anything higher than 640 or 800 ISO. And even 800 is pushing it, quite frankly. And if you own a camera, you might be like, well, why are there options for like 6,000 ISO, 10,000 ISO? Well, sometimes you just have no choice, and sometimes you really want to take a photo and you're willing to sacrifice ISO quality to do it. Now let me show you. Right now my camera is at 125 ISO, but if we raise the ISO, now my video is brighter, but now my video is too bright. Well, it's also too grainy. That's why you keep it at 100 ISO. Now let's say I want this high ISO for whatever reason. We can compromise with the f-stop. Let me show you. Okay, so I just changed my aperture from 1.4 to 4.0. So what is f-stop? Well, f-stop, or also known as aperture, is related to your lens. It is limited by your lens. So whatever lens you have, usually there's a number on it. It tells you how low and how high your f-stop can go. So if you have a low number like 1.4, your lens opens up. The more open your lens is, you're letting in more light. If you let in more light, your image is a lot brighter. But if you're at a higher number, like we're at 4.0 right now, the iris closes more and more and more. And the smaller your iris is, less light, which means darker image. So why would you want a high number? Right now, the background is actually a little bit sharper than it was previously. So if you notice, we're gonna switch back to 1.4 right now, and I'm gonna bring the ISO back down to 100. All right, we're back to my original settings. Now here's the thing, our f-stop or aperture is at 1.4, and so the background is blurry. However, sometimes if you have especially multiple subjects in a video, you might be the only one in focus and everyone behind you might be blurry. If you want everyone in focus, you want a higher number f-stop. You see, when you have a higher number f-stop, your image and depth of field actually becomes, well, smaller, and therefore more subjects in the background become sharper. So let's say a number like 5.6 or above actually makes me sharp and the background sharp. But right now our aperture is at 1.4, which makes me sharp and the background blurry. So the f-stop affects both light and the depth of field between your subject and the background. If you raise your shutter speed, the image gets a lot darker. So originally I was at 125 shutter speed, but now I'm at 800, so the image is a lot darker. So then why would you want high shutter speed? Well, in terms of photography and video, shutter speed not only controls light, but it also controls the shutter of your camera. Now I could give you a complex, detailed explanation, but let me put it in simple terms. You know, sometimes when you take a photo, either your hands shake or the subject tends to move. There's a blur to your photo. Well, shutter speed actually helps with that. The higher shutter speed you have, it actually sharpens your photos. So this is very useful if you tend to have shaky hands or your subject is very fidgety, or especially a lot of people in action photography tend to shoot with high shutter speeds. That's why you can get images of football players mid-run and it's completely sharp and it's not blurry at all. You shoot with high shutter speed. However, if you shoot with high shutter speed, it's fine if it's daytime and you're outside. There's plenty of light from the sun. However, if you're indoors and you want to shoot with something like what I'm shooting now, which is a 125 shutter speed, that's fairly high. So what you need is artificial light. I'm using a video light right now, and video lights help you keep your ISO and your aperture and your shutter speed as low as possible so you get the highest quality footage possible without sacrificing quality. So that's as simple of a rundown I can do on f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO.
Super expensive though. Hurry up and pick so we can order.
I'm sorry, I'm jamming out.
I don't care.
DPR concert?
I did go to the DPR concert.
I did too!
Yeah.
Because me and my friend went, but we were looking for you.
Hey, what's your name, man?
Josh.
Josh? Nice to meet you,
Nice
Josh.
to meet you. Holy crap! Okay, alright.
Let's do it. Can you hold this real quick? All right, our next question comes from YouTube. This comes from BrissXLife. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He asks, what camera, what settings, and how do you edit / color grade? You're hands down one of the dopest photographers I know. Briss, is it? First of all, thank you very much. I would not consider myself the best. Like I said, I don't even consider myself a real photographer. I am completely self-taught. You know, I do this really more as a hobby. I'm like an amateur, but a really good amateur. So first of all, what camera do I shoot with? Well, I shoot with the Canon 1DX Mark II. It's a little bit of an overkill, but I actually got a camera that is this expensive because I plan to also shoot feature films on this camera. So this is a great photography camera and it's a great film camera as well. What settings do I shoot on? Well, typically I try to shoot on as low an ISO as possible. First of all, I'll get my camera down to 100 ISO. That guarantees the cleanest quality image that I can get. Then I always try to shoot on the lowest number aperture as possible. So I try to get my f-stop to typically 1.4, which is what my lens allows. And I try to shoot at that because I want that soft, creamy background and bokeh. And we'll talk about bokeh in a future video. And then my shutter speed, I also like to keep around 125 or as high as possible because then we have the sharpest image quality there is. However, that's not as possible at night. So I will try to keep my shutter speed to about 60 to 125. I never want to go lower than 60 because that's when you introduce camera shake and there might be blurriness. So then I will typically bump up the ISO. Even though you do get digital noise the more you bump up your ISO, I would rather have a slightly higher ISO than lose my creamy soft background in my bokeh. For me, that is my signature look and style. As for editing and color grading, I tend to edit in Adobe Lightroom. I like to lower the whites, raise the highlights, crush the blacks, and I like to actually manipulate the green or blues in my photo and typically make them teal. I like to play on the teal and magenta color grading.
We gon' break up, then we make up. Act like we're gonna be friends. Raise the fire, take me higher. Leave it all over again.
Oh shit, it's all Japanese.
Leave it all over again. All over again. Leave it all over again.
Alright, this next question comes from Luna's Theorist. They ask, what do you prefer, DSLR or mirrorless cameras? Are there any real differences in the quality? Also, do you believe editing is all that matters? Lightroom, for example. Or putting in the effort of angles are just as important, if not more important, sorry. Okay, so this is a great question and definitely more of a gearhead type question. I feel like the generic public might not really care, but if you're into getting more advanced cameras, you might start to wonder, do I want a DSLR or do I want a mirrorless camera? Well, what's the difference? First of all, a DSLR camera actually has a mirror inside the camera where it flips every time you take a photo. That's why the other type is called a mirrorless camera. It doesn't have that mirror. So what are the main differences? Well, first of all, I've shot with both DSLRs and mirrorless all my life. I started off on DSLRs, then I moved on to mirrorless. I shot with two mirrorless cameras, the Sony a7S II and then the Lumix GH5, but recently I returned to the DSLR family with the 1DX Mark II. Now I got the 1DX Mark II not because I wanted a DSLR camera, I just got it because this is a better camera. But could I have gotten a better mirrorless camera? Quite possibly. But after coming back to the DSLR, having used the mirrorless for many, many years, I'm actually glad that I'm with a DSLR again. Because here are the differences. This may not be important to too many people, but I know a lot of photographers actually care about the shutter. I'm talking about the satisfying click every time you take a photo. Because the mirrorless camera doesn't have a mirror that physically turns, you're not gonna get a satisfying click when you click the shutter on your camera. However, especially with a 1DX Mark II with a heavy mirror like this, when you click a photo, especially when you press that button down and you got a high continuous shot going, you can really feel the mirrors turning jamming, and you can really feel the actual physical click in the button. I know that sounds really random and like a small little factoid, but really it's a personal preference, and I know a lot of photographers actually care about that. The mirrorless does have some advantages. A lot of mirrorless cameras have good low ISO because they are electronic cameras and they have more features like that. But Canon in general also has really good low light features anyways. Not as good as something like the Sony a7S II, but still, mirrorless does have its advantages. Mirrorless can also offer you more features than most typical DSLRs, and they are cheaper, and they're a lot more compact. So if you want small, travel-worthy cameras, especially if you want to start vlogging, honestly, a mirrorless is the way to go. But a DSLR, well, if you're into rough and tumbling photography and filmmaking like me, a big fat heavy camera like a DSLR, and most DSLRs tend to be really heavy, it's honestly the best way to go. For me, I dropped my mirrorless camera multiple times. However, I have never dropped a DSLR in my life. DSLRs, especially the Canon, the way they design their grips and the heftiness of the camera, it actually makes it pretty hard to drop those cameras. So honestly, it's personal preference, but I do prefer the DSLR. And I do think in general, Canon, which is mainly a DSLR lineup, they are introducing, I believe, their first mirrorless camera. It just takes better quality photos than most mirrorless cameras. And obviously, I think Nikon takes better photos than a Canon, but I've never actually messed with the Nikon. And then is editing all that matters, or does actually preparing beforehand matter as well? Absolutely. Listen, you can fix a lot of things in post, even cropping angles. However, doing as much as you can before you actually take the photo will mean that you have less to edit. And the less you edit, the more quality you will actually preserve. So yes, you have to do as much as you can in person on site before you actually move on to the editing process. All right, our fourth question comes from Nicoretto2. They ask, I'm broke and I can't buy any lenses. I guess I can only take decentish pics, right? Well, now, of these two photos, which do you think was taken with a bad lens and which do you think was taken with a good lens? Wrong answer! Both were taken with a cheap-ass lens. You see, there are many limitations to photography. However, even if you have a lower end camera and you have a lower end lens, you can still take some pretty good photos. Let me show you. These photos were taken with a lower end camera and with a cheaper lens. Still pretty good, right? It's not exactly the best quality and it's not the best at reading light, but still, I think it's pretty good. And then let me show you this. Here's a photo taken with a lower end camera and a really good lens. Here's a photo taken with a really good camera and a lower end lens. The lens is important. Yes, it's important to have a good camera, but it's more important to have a good lens as well. So yes, there are some restrictions in quality that you're gonna get if you have a lower end lens. But honestly, it's just all about creativity and having good setups and willing to prepare beforehand to try and make up for the weaknesses of your bad lenses and your lower end cameras. So, and just an FYI, these lower end lenses that I shot with, they were $100 on Amazon. It's closed? Yeah. Oh, that's some bullshit. Well, I'm out of ideas. I mean, generally, we all want Asian food, right? So, like, if we can just narrow down between Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Viet, we can make it easier. Obviously, we know Korea #1, but it's about what are we in the mood for? Quinn. You're the designated driver. You gotta make the decision.
That's what you guys decide, and I'll drive.
No. See, when I was always the DD, I always chose the places. Remember? So.
Note stuff up here.
You don't need to know stuff. Just pick pick the country. Who's your bias?
I don't choose bias.
Who's your Asian food bias?
You say Vietnamese, duh. But I just had Vietnamese food. Korean or Japanese?
Korean or Japanese? Lydia, Korean or Japanese? She's narrowed it down.
What do you want?
If we go Korean, we could do Korean restaurant. Since Lydia's not that hungry, not Korean barbecue.
Oh,
we could do we could do Korean toshirak.
Where are the toshirak?
Auto Kitchen, OTTO.
Is it across Auto Kitchen.
No, Super One or Han One or one of those.
It's closed
in Cerritos.
Auto.
What the fucking, all these fucking Korean places closing on Sunday, you.
If you go to a Japanese place, I could just get like a rice bowl.
There's what?
Rice bowl.
If you go to like a Japanese place.
Japanese.
Oh, another one's closed today. I just typed
Is today a holiday? This can't be
I
right.
think it's just Sunday.
Korean places are not this close.
Yeah.
Sunday.
6 too. I know they close early.
Yeah. But the question is it open?
It is.
Oh, your car is so low. For a tall person like me, it's like a nightmare.
So I missed on one of the comments. I'm being a total season's greeting. I
Alright, so our fifth and final question comes from @HaleyZillion on Twitter. She asks, how to make good use of a lackluster location? How to make something really shine on camera? Not literally shine, but like, you know, pop off. Okay, how do you pop off? Well, let me show you a photo. So in this photo, my location was a blank white room. Not much to work with, right? Well, first of all, I had my model sit on the table, but instead of her back just being up against the wall, I had her actually at a tilted angle and I shot against the corner. By shooting against the corner, you actually play with the three-dimensionality in the photo and you kind of give it an interesting perspective and add more life into the photo. But I wanted to add a little bit more depth of field, so there were these potted plants around and I placed them around her. By placing these things in the foreground, there are now multiple levels to the depth of field. Let's take a look at another photo. This is the same location. I basically just shot in a house. So in this one, she's leaning against an open door. It's fine. It's a nice photo, but the location is a little bland. You can improve upon it. And it was as simple as just closing the door. By closing the door and actually shooting through the glass, now there's this interesting reflection and there's an actual extra layer to the photo. The photo is just more interesting to look at and it's more unique because all I did was simply close the door. You see, whether or not you have a bland location, there are methods to actually making it more interesting. Like I said, it could be as easy as closing the door. It could be the way you pose your model, or it could be adding things to the scene with prompts. Lighting can also make the perspective more interesting as well. Mind you, sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes some locations are too bland. Sometimes you don't have the necessary resources to make it look better. And honestly, at that point, you either shoot in that bland location or you move locations. Sometimes it's just not possible to make a bland location better, but these are a few tips and tricks. Anyway guys, that's it for the very first episode of 5 Question Photography. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Like I said, I am a constant student of the art, so if I learn something new, I will try to pass it down onto you guys. So if you guys have any other questions regarding photography and you want me to answer them in a future 5 Questions video, go ahead and leave your questions in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this, consider clicking subscribe and turn on that notification bell. Go ahead and click like. It actually helps this video get outreach to more people. It helps with YouTube's search algorithm. And if you want to support me, go to patreon.com/formoftherapy. You can pledge $2 or more and you'd be supporting this channel and my endeavors. But regardless, thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace.